Hey, this is a short video to explain how I got face tracking working in TouchDesigner. So what I mean by face tracking is basically being able to detect whether a face is in a frame of live video, being able to follow its movements around, moving left, right, towards the camera, away, and being able to detect different facial features. So maybe eyes and nose, if someone blinks their eyes or opens their mouth or how much it's open, all should be accessible. And I couldn't find an easy way to do that in TouchDesigner, but I did remember that a student last year had used this little JavaScript library called CLM Tracker. And if you go to the repo, you don't need to go to the repo, you can just go to mine, but this is the library that's underneath. This is the thing that's doing all the work. And you can read the paper that kind of is the background for how this thing works. There's also a handy map here that I've replicated in my own repo, but basically this is what it's doing, right? It detects a face and then it assigns all these different numbered landmarks to that face. So if you wanted to know where the nose is, you would look at point number 62. It has X and Y coordinates, and that's where it shows up in the video. If you see it moving left and right, those coordinates, the X coordinate would change as it moves left and right, and you could respond to that in P5.js or in JavaScript. But we want to do this all in TouchDesigner. So I thought since this works and seems to work well, maybe what I'd do is just make a web page that uses CLM Tracker and JavaScript to detect all of these landmarks. And I made a website that allows you to just say which of these points you're interested in and have it send those points and the data, the X and Y coordinates for each of them to TouchDesigner through WebSockets. So let me show you what this looks like. Face tracking is my repo, so I will go to code and hit download zip. Actually, I've already downloaded it, so let me just open that. Here it is. And the only file that we're really interested in is index.html. And you should be able to just double click on it and it should open in your browser. If it doesn't, you can usually press like Control O or something in your browser and then find the file. So what it's doing is basically, if we look back at the map here of landmarks, it allows you to select which landmarks you're interested in. You can use commas or dashes to specify range. But I think like in this example, let's say I was only interested in the two that represent the eyes and then the one for the nose. I think 62 was the center of the nose. So that's good enough for me. Then it's asking me for the server address. So where does it send the JSON data to? What is JSON? It's basically like a structured way of sending data back and forth. So instead of just sending numbers, it's going to send something more structured, and that makes it easier for us to parse on the TouchDesigner end. So here's the address, localhost. You could use that on yours unless you're doing this between computers. In other words, this is open on one computer and TouchDesigner is open on another computer, which should work. But in my case, I'm just doing it on the same computer. And localhost is the address for my computer that I'm sitting at. It would be the same for you. And then the port number. So I'll remember that this is port 12,000. I could hit connect to server right now, but there is no server. So let's start a server in TouchDesigner. So I'm just going to start with a blank network. And I'm going to add a web server DAT. Now I don't want WebSocket, so web server DAT. And then if I click this little arrow down here, this is the list of callbacks. So when something happens with this server, it'll call one of these functions. The one we're interested in is on WebSocket receive text. So when the web page sends some WebSocket text over, it's going to do something with it. So I'm going to choose viewer active here and actually edit this. And instead of the line of code that's there, what I want it to do is to take the data that's coming into this function and put it in a text stat. So I will over here add a text stat, and that is called text1. So let me just address that text1 operator and say that its text should equal data. And that's it. I shouldn't have to do anything else. So I'm going to close this. And I've got now the text should show up in here as it gets sent from the browser. Let's see if that works right away. So the first thing is I need to go over to web server and choose the same port number that I used in the browser, 12,000. The default works fine. And then I have to turn active on. Once I've done that, I have a web server and I have a place where the data that's coming in will appear. So let me just hit connect to server. And it asks me if my camera's okay to use. I have the blind down, so let me open that. Okay, I hit allow, and that's it. I can toggle the preview to show it again. If you notice, my video was showing flipped. It depends on your camera. It may show flipped or not. We can deal with that later. So it should be connected. It says connected here. Let's see. I see some data, but it's not moving, and I'm moving my head. So what's going on? This is kind of important. If this is full screen and I switch, I'm just using Alt Tab, you can kind of see there was a moment where it actually did kind of move a little bit. So what's happening is as soon as I leave the browser, it stops sending data on the WebSocket. So one thing I can do, at least in this browser, is not make it full screen. And then you can see behind it is moving. The other thing I can do is if it's not full screen, when I switch to TouchDesigner, it keeps going. It's also worth knowing that if you switch tabs, it won't work. So you have to be in the tab, and you can switch to TouchDesigner, but you have to make sure it's not full screen, at least with the browser I'm using. So there's a little bit of hoops to jump through, but you should at some point be able to see the data moving. The next thing is, this is obviously this is this is JSON. That's why we've got these brackets and colons and so on. It's done all that from the web page, but now I want to be able to interpret that from TouchDesigner. So I'm going to parse the JSON and actually get the structure out of it. So there we can see there's showing the structure, but I don't just want to see it like this indented and colored. I actually want it to show up as a table. So let me click table here. This looks good, except the columns are kind of going left to right instead of showing it more like, an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to choose transpose table, and now I see I've got 27x, 27y. So those are the x and y coordinates for point number 27. And so I've got the three different points that I'm interested in, and all the numbers are showing up. Now, the web page itself, I think it's set to 640 by 480 maybe for the video. You could change that if you wanted to. It could be smaller or larger. But what the web page does is it translates that to a number between negative 0.5 and 0.5, just because we're probably looking for that kind of data from TouchDesigner. So if I look at 27 or 62x, right? Look at this row here. As I move to the left, see that the number goes closer to 0.5. And then as I move to the right, it goes closer to negative 0.5. Now that's actually the opposite of what I want, but I can fix that. The first thing though is to turn these into channels. So I will do under chop, I will choose dat to chop. And now I've got channels. And it's the same thing. If I move my head left and right, I can see that 62x channel moving. Looks good. So the last thing is, like I said, I think it is moving in the wrong direction. So I will just run this through math. And all I have to do is channel pre-op. I can just say negate. So now it actually goes the other way. Okay, looks good. So I think that's pretty much all I need. I can use this data, and maybe what I'll do is really quickly just kind of, let's add a null to this. And what I'll do is I will just make 3 circles. And those will represent the nose and the eyes. So since this one's the nose, I'll make it red. And I think all of them, I want them to be much smaller. So let's make them like 0.01. And I've got small, oh, that's really small. Well, I think maybe also I need to change the resolution. So 720p. So those are okay. Now what I would do is, first of all, if I want to see them all on the screen at one time, I will composite them together. And I don't think I want multiply. I'll use like add or over, and highlight all of these and connect them to the composite. And now I should have, it looks like just one dot because they're all on top of each other. So let's start connecting these values that we're getting to the x and y coordinates of these circles. So here is 27x, which is, okay, so 62 I think is the nose. So let's make this the x, and 62y will be the y. So I'm moving my nose around right now, and it is following me, so that's good. I will do this same thing for the 2 circles that are the eyes. There's x, and there's y. So they're moving together now, mostly. And then do the same thing here, 27, x, and y. So now I've got my face. As I tilt my head, you can see it looks like my head is tilting. As I tilt my head up and down, it changes the place where my nose is. There's a microphone in front of my face, so it actually is working pretty well, given that my face is partially blocked. So this is really it. You could recreate this, and again, the web server has to have the right port number, has to be on. The text will show up in the text stat, which gets then turned into a table as it's parsed from JSON. And then we can get channel data out of that, which allows us to influence parameters. I just used a math here to negate these so that they weren't mirrored because the video was mirrored. And then I used a null before I dragged them into these different parameters, and it's working. If I go off the camera, you'll see that they kind of get stuck. And then as I come back on camera, they come back in. You might want to handle that one way or another, depending on what your application is. But this seems pretty good, and I think it's a good solution. The only trick is making sure that your browser stays open. I think that's it. Good luck.